So situated near the tip of Africa is where we're from, South Africa. It's probably closer to Antarctica than it is the US, the UK, or Europe. Add to that various levels of sanctions in the 60s and 70s, hardcore sanction in the 80s, which lasted 10 years, plus a conservative government. The birth of the alternative culture was more a trickle born out of rebellion a few years after the initial onslaught in the north.
Despite political and social unrests, and an economy that's never actually recovered, the advent of the internet brought an accessibility to the scene, which helped it grow. So we often get asked what the scene is like, and we've gone to the trenches to get the lowdown.
And on screen we've got Patrick Davidson, guitarist for Mind Assault, founder and curator for Metal for Africa. We've got John Morrow, guitarist from Margo and an independent reviewer. We've got Reegan Buisson, vocalist for Facing the Gallows, and Carlos Sanches, vocalist for Deadline.
And a wild Lou de Pisani appears from the Drift, Knave, and MK Ondergrond.
So our gateway into the alternative culture started when we, with what we found via radio, and then we kind of met people, and we started clubbing and finding out more stuff about that. That was long before such wonderful things as the internet and Spotify and all that kind of thing. So, John, we're going to start with you. How did your gateway into the alternative culture start?
Sure. I suppose probably around 1984 or thereabouts, I was getting properly into music. I was, 11 or 12 or whatever it was. And I needed something more rebellious, something more shocking than the punk rock I was getting into, and just straight up stuff like Billy Idol and that kind of shit. So through the usual channels of Kiss and Ozzy and the Crew and everything that was happening at the time, I started getting into proper metal, and I kind of rode the wave of the metal genre as it evolved through all the major stages. So the thrash and proto black metal into thrash and not thrash, into death metal and grindcore, and from grindcore into obviously the second wave of black metal and the more industrial stuff that we saw in the 90s, and all the various things that happened thereafter. But during that time, I was also kind of starting to branch out and feel that I needed something a bit more. So I started getting into proper blues and serious jazz, and even like 60s and 70s rock and psychedelic rock and krautrock and prog. And after a while, I was just like, you know what? I think I may just be a music fan and not necessarily into one thing, even though I'll probably always be a headbanger at heart. And beyond that, I mean, obviously the South African scene shaped everything that I was doing. So all the clubs that we were going to, there was obviously punks and skins and goths and all this other stuff. And I started making friends with those guys and getting into that music and getting into those scenes, just anything I could get my hands on. And especially in this country where you weren't finding as much as people were in the rest of the world, whenever you found something that was cool, you just grabbed onto it and found more and more of it. And, you know, luckily in this day and age, you can find anything you want. But I mean, back then it was all tape trading and bootlegging and taping shit off the radio, all that great stuff, you know. And I think that also kind of builds a certain character around how you listen to music and what you listen to, by being able to fight for it, you know, to really scratch to find stuff instead of just going online and finding whatever you want immediately. So I think South Africa, especially, as difficult as it was to get into music, actually made it a lot more satisfying when you finally did. And that's kind of my journey. And obviously, you know, fucking bands and writing and all that other shit just came as I went.